FX Nation, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. And this week we're going to go ahead and start off, of course, with our FXN trading group TM24 week 2. The first week, if you haven't watched it, please make sure to go back into the playlist. The playlist is going to be FXN Mentoring 2024. Check out week 1, please, so you don't get lost and you understand the concept that we're covering. Throughout every single week, we're going to kind of touch bases on the previous week and then move forward and start to include more concepts into the strategy itself. Guys, if you're new to the channel, my name is Mark. I've been trading since 2011, and I'm here to show you my strategy every step of the way with as much detail as possible. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get this week started for week 2. So again, we're going to jump right into market cycles. And what we're going to do is this week, we're going to go ahead and we're going to cover the following. We're going to cover peak formations and ADR ranges specifically. We're going to talk about using the daily charts. We're also going to talk about when should you split a market cycle and when should you not. We're going to talk about market resets, and we're going to talk about failed resets. So these are the topics that we're going to talk about this particular week, guys. We're going to get into a lot of details for each specific topic. So we're going to break down everything as much as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys. So now that we are on the charts, everything that we're going to talk about in this particular video kind of goes all in together. And we're going to start off with just literally going through each individual chart and just showing you updates that you would do as you're doing this in real time. So the important factor about me doing this course now, guys, is I want to do it in real time. So like whenever this video goes up, you'll be able to immediately see the impact of what I'm talking about in this video in the actual markets. That's the whole point. Let's first go ahead and go through some of these charts, and this is on a Sunday. Market's not open yet, obviously, so let's see and go through these and see if we can make any kind of adjustments. Euro AUD is still coming off a peak formation low, right? So we're not doing much of anything right now because we still haven't even passed the failed reset. When I look at pairs like this that are coming off a new peak formation low that have actually come off a failed reset, the things that I'm looking for, all right, to happen is I really want for this to be like a full-blown like new cycle going back up. I'm really trying to see if price action is willing to break the failed resets. Because if it's not willing to break the failed resets, then the likelihood of us getting a full cycle back up again are very low. If we can't get past the failed resets, what tends to happen is we either start to get sideways movement. Okay, so basically this does nothing but consolidate, and the failed reset area acts as a form of resistance, while the peak formation low acts as a form of support, and we just get consolidation until eventually it breaks. That's the first thing that I want to see here. So on this pair, I'm not really doing anything much of an update because it's just still consolidating. For me, it's not telling me, hey, I want to go much higher, right? Because it's just, if it wanted to go much higher, it would have broken the failed reset area already, and it hasn't. Okay, so another thing that we can do in this kind of situation, specifically with how price action is right now, is we can start to look at the daily charts, seeing if the daily charts will actually help us, and seeing, can we get a clear direction of what the daily chart is doing? Because if the daily chart has a clear direction of what it's doing, then that will give us clues as to what's going to happen on the lower time frame. So let's split this up into the 1 hour and the daily, and then let's take a look. Looking at the daily now, you can clearly see that we are in a downtrend. Okay, now this, I want you to pay attention to this this spot here. Okay, so we've come down, retraced, and then broke. And what I mean by broken is we've broken this low right here. So we've broken the low. Very likely to me is that we're going to be further moving down. Okay, now the further that we move down, if we look to the left here, the only point of structure that we have are these 2 points here that price action wants to go to. All right, now how do we get down here is the next question. Well, in order to get down here in the lower time frames, this right here would need to be a reset. It would need to reset, obviously, to keep going down. Okay, so if it keeps failing to break above this failed reset here, then, and I'm also looking at, the daily time frame, and this is already clearly broken this daily structure here and is working its way back down again, then to me it's very likely that it's going to go lower. First place that you can see where price action would have any kind of structure on the daily would be here in these 2 points. So right around like 158, 500 or so, give or take. Okay. So in order to do that though, we need to reset. Now on the daily here, I want you to notice a couple things. Okay. I want you to notice how every time we get into this area, right at like 160,000, right, we get rejected. Now the 160, of course, is basically on the 1 hour time frame, is where the peak formation low is. So I want you to have that contrast there as to where we are on the lower time frame. I can see this behavior moving sideways and consolidating until it breaks, and meaning breaks either to the low side or breaks to the high side. I don't care whether it goes up or whether it goes down. You should not care whether this goes up or this goes down. The only thing that you should care about is the fact that once it does go up or down, you have the directional bias that you need to look for trades going in that same direction. That's it. That's all you care about, is does the pair give me a clear directional bias that I can trade with? If the answer is no, then you should not be looking for setups in that specific pair until it provides you with that clarity of the direction bias. For right now, we're not doing anything on this particular pair. All right, we're just going to wait. If it breaks lower, that's great. This right here will become a reset. No worries. And then you can look for sells. You can look for sells all the way down to 158, 500. Okay, that's the daily target that we would have here. All right. Now, if this were to, let's say, for some reason, create a new peak formation low here, and this becomes a failed reset, right? Because it's just consolidating. Okay. If that were to be the case, then the first target is pretty simple. It's always going to be the failed resets, because that's the first point of structure that I would need. So no matter what direction it goes in, like, you already know what the targets are and what you would want price action to do once it decides what it wants to be, whether it's a reset or a failed reset. Now let's take a look at Euro JPY, the next pair. So this pair specifically is coming off a peak formation low. Obviously we're looking for buys. Obviously we know from the daily time frame, clearly we're in a huge uptrend, right? We know that the JPY pair right now is an extremely weak pair. So anything that's paired with it will likely easily beat it, right? And so that's why you see all of the JPY pairs pretty much doing the exact same thing. Now, just because you're going in a huge daily uptrend does not mean that you're not going to have retracements. So those retracements that you see here on the daily time frame, like this one here, the bigger ones that you see here are basically that represent themselves on the daily time frame. These are basically going to be full cycle. But the important thing about this is the fact that notice how even the full cycles, okay, they do not break below full structure, the previous structure, right? So that keeps the trend essentially going. So the simple thing to understand, right, is this: in a downtrend, okay, in order for us to break the downtrend and go up again for an extended period of time or change the trend, we basically need to break these points of structure, right? This is all very simple stuff. It's been in thousands of books for 50, 60 years already. Okay, this is nothing special. This is very basic, very simple stuff to understand. Okay, no matter what people name it, no matter what, what special names they give it or whatever, it's still the same stuff. Okay, it just sounds cooler if you call it something else. All these things work the same way. So you can see here where price action, went up and then immediately rejected. But the important part here in this section is you notice how this wicked all the way down, but the body itself never closed, right? Never closed above, below that. Okay, those are all important factors, because that's really what you want to see for the trend to keep going up. If this were to be a change of trend, this really would have been a more aggressive move that should have probably closed somewhere down here. So this would have went like this, then giving you a pullback, because this section here would have needed to really clearly break below this. When we look at a pair like Euro JPY, all right, on the 1 hour time frame, we know that we're looking for buys, and then looking at it from a daily time frame, we know that we're looking for buys also on a very longer time frame until something changes. Okay, so these are the pairs, also the JPY pairs, that we end up getting super cycles on, meaning cycles that are more than 4.5 times ADR without getting a new peak formation high or a peak formation low. Okay, so this particular one here, if we put in the EMAs and we just focus in on the 13 and 50, those are the only two that we use for helping confirm a peak formation, you could see that we haven't had a single crossover yet in between these two EMAs on a 1 hour chart. That's one of the first things that we're looking for helping confirm peak formations. So in this case here, we're not really doing anything at all. Okay, we're just keep going with the trend. That's all we're doing until we get a significant pullback, okay, that allows us to get a peak formation. All right, we just keep going. Now, based on the higher time frames like the weekly, monthly, we have these targets here. Now, these targets, okay, how do I get these targets? These targets are basically pulled from previous data. Now, in order to pull these targets, we actually needed a different chart. Okay, so if you go into, because this chart here that I'm using, this Owanda chart, only goes to like 2005 or something like that. We needed a chart that went further back to get actual price action of where price has been before. Okay, so in order to do that, you would go into the watch list, and then let's say you're looking for a Euro JPY. You want the pairs that have this one here, Forex ICE, because all this is just a data service. This isn't a broker. It just collects all of the data and puts it out on the screen. I have these already here. Let me go to that so I can show you exactly where we got these marked. The weekly chart. Okay, you can see how far back we have to go here. Now, first thing, notice this chart goes all the way back to 1971. Okay, now we're at a point now, guys, that we're using our reference points back from the 90s. That's how bad JPY is right now. We're going back to the 90s of price action. Okay, so easy targets are from the weekly is back from 92, and then also from 1991 and 1990. All right, so this is how we get the previous targets that we saw on the other chart. All we're looking for is, again, continuing to look for buys, because that's all we have. Okay, we're going to continue to look for buys until we get any kind of an evidence of a peak formation high to form. Once that peak formation high forms, we know, based on the fact that we have not gotten to any major structure, that there is nothing out here. If you go back to the left, there's nothing as far as structure goes that can hold price. What does that mean? It means that we're basically out in the middle of space. Okay, and typically how you would see this is like this. If you have, okay, price action doing this, and then you get a reversal, price action is likely to go back to these previous points, and then this is where you end up getting the peak formations. Now, because we're so far out in this particular time frame of the daily, we have to go back so far to find these specific points. What I mean by out in the middle of nowhere, like it's literally like here, like this one here, like it's out in the middle of nowhere. There's no structure to the left at all to help it stay there. What you're going to end up finding is when you get to areas like this that are here out in the middle of nowhere, you're going to make peak formations, right, which is perfectly fine, but those peak formations are very weak, meaning that they don't stay there. Okay, like they don't hold. So you'll end up getting resets. Okay, so one of the ways that helps me try to find where are possible resets going to happen when peak formations are being created that are out in the middle of nowhere. to me, those are very likely going to end up becoming resets. So for example, if Euro JPY, if this right here would have came down further and had the crossover and created a peak formation high, because this is happening out in the middle of nowhere where there is no price action to the left as a form of resistance that can help support it right in that area, the likelihood that I'm thinking is that it's going to end up being a reset and prices are just going to go ahead and go higher. Okay, so that's what I would be expecting. Now, does it happen all the time? No. There will be times where you have the peak formation, but it does a big pullback. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. It may do a full cycle. So it may do something like this where you have a full cycle. Be aware that if you're out in the middle of nowhere, okay, and you're seeking high prices, obviously seeking higher prices, pretty obvious that it creates a peak formation high, and you can expect a reset to come out of it. So in this particular case for this pair, like, I'm not doing anything, we're not changing anything about it. We're just going to continue to look for buys. Price action to me is a train. These areas here that I mark are just train stops along the way. So EuroCAD is coming off a new peak formation low, and we're looking for buys. Now, what I'm looking for out of this specific pair is I'm really looking for price action to go ahead and really want to break above this here. Okay, because this is probably going to act as a form of resistance. So I want to make sure that we can clear this, because if we can clear this, I know that we're going to end up making a full cycle. On this one, we're not doing anything. I'm still looking for buys, obviously, which is fine. Okay, so we're not changing. There's nothing to update here. We're still looking for buys. I could expect a pullback, and when you get a peak formation low, okay, or even a peak formation high, all right, and you start to get your crossover, you have your confirmations and everything, it's completely normal for you to get one major pullback, and then do this. That's okay, and that's completely normal. Now, one of the things that you can do to help you find out, okay, how far is this pullback likely to go or likely to come back? Okay, what you can do is you can just simply put a regular fib on the chart. Okay, so you do it from the bottom of the wick to the top of the wick where the first pullback is starting. And in this particular example right now, it's not pulling back extremely hard or anything like that, but this is the first point of it starting to pull back. So if this, for example, pulls back harder or deeper, then I'm going to be looking for price to pull back into this range here. Basically this between the 50 and the 618. This range right here. And so that's where I would be expecting the pullback to go to. Okay, and then I'll look for, once price comes back to this area here, then you can go down to the lower time frames on like a 15-minute time frame and start to look for the patterns during the London or the New York session that we typically trade to look for setups. So we're gonna get to all that stuff in future videos, obviously. So don't worry about that now, but just know that when a peak formation is created, okay, and everything's, you have all the confirmations and everything for that peak formation, it's okay for price action to have a pullback, okay, before going. That's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And in those cases, you can go ahead and just put a simple fib. Okay, you don't have to add anything to the fib, change it, nothing. It's just a regular fib. Put it from the wick of where the peak formation low is created to the wick of where the pullback first started. And the pullback, very important, the pullback that I'm talking about is a pullback after your peak formation is created and confirmed. So meaning, after the crossover and break of structure and all that stuff. So wait for all that to happen. The pullback always happens after all of those confirmations. So now looking at Euro Swiss, still coming off that peak formation low. We're working our way higher. We're still looking for buys. Now, how close are we to a peak formation. So as of right now on this particular chart, we've gone up about 160 pips, and it's averaging about 60 pips to begin with. So you can see here, averaging about 60 pips and about 160 pip moves so far. Right now, we're just starting to get into the range of 2.5 times ADR. We're actually about 2.6 times ADR. Okay, so we're in that range now where a peak formation could be created at any point. Okay, which is perfectly fine. Where are the ideal places that peak formation that we would like to see peak formations form? Well, for me, it's very simple. Peak formations for me are ideal to set up where previous resets and peak formations have already existed. Okay, that's just basically going back to, like, let's say resistance or you know, things of that nature. Very simple to understand terms. So for me, if I can get, I'm still looking for buys out of here because there is no evidence at all right now that a peak formation is even trying to form. Okay, so we're still looking for buys until we get any evidence of a peak formation that's forming. But the important thing about this pair here is that you just have to be very cautious in the form of understanding where you are in the actual cycle, that you're towards the end of the cycle. Now, that doesn't mean that because you're entering the the end of the cycle that you can't get setups. You can still get setups all the way until the very end of the cycle. That's not the problem. The only thing is that you just want to be aware of where you are in that cycle. So this is where, if you're trading, let's say 5 pairs or something of that nature, you're only trading 5 pairs, you're not paying attention to like 28, right? It'll be very useful for you because you can keep track of where these pairs are. Okay, so every day, if you're coming into into your charts, let's say on a Sunday, and you're doing a quick review of the upcoming week of your pairs that you actually trade, simple things that you can do on a Sunday when reviewing your pairs is literally just marking out, how many, how far into that current cycle you are. So like for this case, you can, do 2.6 times ADR so far. And so now it's visually there on your chart. And so if you do this to like all your 5 or 6 pairs that you look at on a regular basis that you trade, now you're always in the know of where you are in the cycle. And so it makes you immediately aware, okay, I may be at 2.6 times ADR. If I get a really good opportunity in the smaller time frames to take a trade, that's great. That meets all the rules and trading plan that I have. That's fantastic. But if I don't get a trade set up in that meets all my rules and requirements, and I get something strange to happen, I know that it's probably likely because it's starting to create a new peak formation high. These are just small things that make a huge difference, okay, on how you see a pair when you're first looking at it on a Sunday, Sunday evening before the markets open. Also, these areas here are likely where I would want to see a peak formation high form, very simply because there's structure there, right? Also, areas up here as well, these could also be very good areas for peak formation highs to form. Okay, there are market orders that are sitting up here. We're going to talk about market orders in a separate video, but just know that these areas here are the likely areas that we would want price action to go to and form that peak formation. It doesn't have to, but this is going to be the ideal places that we would want, because there's going to be orders that are sitting on top of these areas that make perfect places for peak formations to form. So Euro USD, this one here, we're basically waiting for either failed reset or reset. So I had it on Friday. After Friday, we kind of started to see already that we're starting to get basically what we discussed in Euro AUD, where it's just consolidation, right? Not doing much of anything, right? Now, if we take a look at the daily time frame on this, what are we seeing from the daily time frame? Well, we're not really seeing much of anything, to be honest, because we're also consolidating on the daily time frame as well. there's no real sense of direction. If anything, when I look at the daily time frame and I'm really focusing in on just this section by itself, okay, we could see that price action went up and reversed, broke this right here, this structure, came down, retested it, and moved further down. For me, the likelihood, at least from just looking at Euro USD, would be to either have one of two things: either consolidate between these two ranges of 107.450 and essentially 106.800 until we get a break of either one. Again, I don't care which one it does. I know that looking at it from a 1 hour time frame, that if this were to be a peak formation low here, if this right here creates a new peak formation low, then my targets are really easy. They're just up here. Once we break past this stuff here, like 107.500, once we break past all this stuff, we're going to end up getting a full cycle. Okay, I know that. Once we break here, we're going to end up getting a full cycle, right? The question is this just going to stall out and consolidate back, sideways? And for me, this sideways movement, this consolidation here, is just not something that I want to be in a trade in. Okay, I'm only looking for pairs that give me very specific things that I'm looking for. And the very first thing that the pair has to provide for me is a clear directional bias. And if it does not do that, I don't care how much I love the pair, I just won't trade it for that day or that week or until it figures out the clear directional bias that it wants to do. So something very important that all of you need to understand is the importance of having the directional bias. That's why we spend so much time, 2 weeks on it, because I need you guys to understand how important this is, and also not to worry about pairs that are moving sideways. Who cares? Let the shit move sideways all it wants to. I don't care. If this pair were to, let's say, go further down, okay, and let's say this turns into a reset and it goes down. Well, if it goes into a reset, it goes down. Well, the only thing that I'm worried about is price action going down here on the daily. Okay, going down to this area here. That's going to be the next area of structure that we have on the daily time frame. So from here to here, that's going to be the area where I'm going to be looking for sell setups. But first, you let price action do what it's going to do first. Pound JPY, same like Euro JPY. We're going to be in a huge, uptrend obviously on this one as well. And I mean, you can see how far we are out from the next major structure, 214.900. We're pretty far out. Okay, so this is obviously going to end up being a super cycle, which is perfectly fine. If we look at the EMAs, clearly we didn't have a crossover. Got pretty close here on the crossover, but didn't happen. So this is going to be a super cycle, and so we just continue to look for buys. That's it. It's very simple. We continue to look for buys until we get any evidence of a peak formation. Evidence of a peak formation. Okay, what does that look like? Well, it looks like actually like this, right? If we were to go back here in time to this point right here, okay, this right here, this how this looks is literally what I'm talking about when I say evidence of a peak formation. Okay, because this looks very, very good like evidence of a peak formation. Okay, prices obviously made a huge M on a 1 hour time frame and it's starting to come back down again. You just don't have the crossover yet of the 50 and the 13 yet. This is literally what I'm talking about when I'm saying look for evidence of a peak formation that's forming. Stuff like this, something like this is what you're looking for. Or if we go back further, something like this could also be evidence of a peak formation forming. So when price action starts to go flat and then now starts to drop again, right, and break previous structure, that's all good, right? These are all good things. These are all good things of evidence that we want to see when we're looking for a peak formation to start forming. In this case, we just didn't have the crossover that happened. So obviously no peak formation, and we know based on the previous evidence of this is going to end up just being a super cycle, which is fine. Now looking at this one, a pound AUD, We've come off a peak formation low, right? Price action immediately came back down again. Now this obviously is going to end up being either a failed reset or a reset. Why not just call it a reset? Because it's clearly broken below the previous peak formation low. The reason that I don't call it a reset as of yet is a couple things. Number one, I've seen so many times where price action breaks below the low and then immediately comes back and does this. So that's why. This push here, this hard push, could very easily just be a way for the market to grab orders that are sitting in this area. So that's why, that's the first reason why I don't do it, is because of that. Secondly, is if we go over to the daily time frame and we start using the daily. If we look on the daily time frame, we are clearly in an area right here where there is some major daily structure, which is fine, right? But we haven't broken past that structure. So for me, unless we break past that structure, that's really what I'm looking for to help confirm the reset. Why? Because I know that if we break past this structure, then the likelihood is we're going to that structure, because that's going to be the next area that would have some type of market order sitting underneath it. So if we break past this, I'm looking for sells all the way down to here. The reason that I don't have that labeled yet as a reset is because we have not broken this structure here, and you can see even on this daily candle from Friday is it looks like we wanted to break it, but we really haven't yet on the daily. It's just a wick. So what you see here as big strong bodies on the daily are just wicks. So that's why. So I'm really waiting for the daily chart to break below. Once we really break below on the daily chart, then I can label this as a reset, and I feel very confident to continue to look for sells to get down into this area here based on the daily chart. All right, so looking at pound NZD, and you can see that we're coming off a peak formation low. We've gone pretty much all the way up to the previous peak formation high. Okay, so is that enough for a new cycle, right? Because remember that every cycle has its own ADR. So for example, look at this previous cycle here of averaging, let's say 105, 105, 103, 101, 102, 105. So somewhere in between, let's say 103, 104 area, and then this next cycle clearly in the 97s. Okay, so clearly two different ADRs, okay, for each cycle. So very important that you understand that and keep that in your mind every single time. But here we have this cycle here. This has gone up 260 pips. This is averaging 97. So essentially, if you take your 260 and you divide that by your 97, you end up getting 2.6 times ADR. Okay, so you have enough for a full cycle. Great. Do you have your crossover? Yes, you have your crossover. Have you moved one times, its own ADR? Yes, you have. You moved about 141 pips or so. So yes. And then have you broken structure? Right? That's the next thing. So to me, this has not broken the structure yet, because the structure is right here. Okay, and you can see it wicked to that, but it has not broken that structure. So this specific pair, what I would do is I would mark this as, like, let's say putting a box here, right? And for me, putting a box here just lets me know that this could be a potential for a new peak formation high that's forming, but hasn't confirmed as of yet. What am I looking for? What other things am I looking for? Well, the first thing is we need to have the breakup structure to help confirm that peak formation high. So what we can also do is look at the daily chart. And here, the daily chart, what is it telling you? In this particular case, is not really telling me anything for this specific cycle. If anything, it just tells me this huge wick here on this last candle went up and grabbed orders that were sitting above these two highs here from the 7th of June. That's the only thing that I could see getting from this particular daily chart right now. So what I am looking for, obviously, is I am looking for the break here of this structure. If we can get the break, obviously that'll help confirm a peak formation high, and then we can look for sells. Now, very important that while we're waiting for this kind of last confirmation of transition, I'm not looking for setups in this pair. If this was a pair that I would normally trade, I would not be looking for setups on this pair. Why? Because we haven't had a confirmation yet of a peak formation high. The thing that you have to remember is that your number one job as a trader is to protect your capital at all cost, because if you don't have any capital, you cannot trade. There is no reason that any pair on any day or any setup on any one day should put your capital at risk when you knowingly don't have a clear directional bias. So for this pair, if this was one of my pairs that I would normally trade, I wouldn't trade until we get the confirmation. Now, very simply, that once we get the confirmation, where am I looking at for price action to go once we get it? Well, if we just look at the daily time frame, the easy the easy target would be the very bottom of these daily lows. So basically 206, 270, right? So that would be the first target. If we look at it on the daily time frame, is on the 1 hour time frame, it's just basically going back down to the previous peak formation low. That's it. Okay. Now, if we wanted to go lower than that for another target, then we just have to go further to the left on the actual daily time frame. And so you can look at real big areas here like 204, 400. That would be the next target that I would have. Okay. But for right now, I just won't be doing anything. I have it marked as a possible peak formation high that's forming, and I'm just waiting for the confirmation. That's it. Looking at pound USD now, and this one's coming off a reset. So this one, nothing is really going to change on it. I'm still looking for sells on it because we're still coming off the reset. We don't have enough yet for a full cycle. We're about, I think, almost at 2 times ADR on this one. So not looking for peak formation as of yet. If we go to the daily time frame, really there is no, you could see here from the price action down here that the only area here that I see that has any kind of real structures down here, all the way down at basically like 125. Yeah, 125. That's really where the bulk of the the structure is. That's where I'm looking for price action to go long term, is somewhere around that area there. Okay. If we go down to the smaller time frame, like the 1 hour time frame, you can get smaller areas of structure that are not visible on the daily chart, obviously. So for example, this area here would be another area of structure that I would like to target. So 125, 200, let's say, somewhere around there. So but for right now, I'm not looking for anything but besides just sells. Now granted, you see the price action that's happening right now on pound USD, and it's almost very similar to euro USD, where it's just moving sideways. It's not really doing much of anything. Okay, so to me, not really attractive, in the way that the price action is right now. But that's just what it is. The one concern that I would have is if price action were to do something like this, where it goes back up here, and then we start to get into this more of a sideways movement. Now what could cause this is ultimately if the dollar index starts to do that as well. So obviously the USD pairs are highly correlated to the dollar index, of course. And so if you start to get sideways movement on the dollar index, the pairs that are, I think, most affected by it are going to be the majors, right? The pound USD, euro USD, NZD USD, all the major pairs that are tied to the dollar that are majors. Okay, are going to very likely do the same thing. So something to keep in mind. So on this particular pair, like I'm not really doing, there's nothing to update. It's still pretty much the same. You're still coming off the reset. You're not anywhere near, a full cycle or anything like that. So there's nothing to update here. You may just update where you are in the cycle. So you're at 2.2 times ADR right now, and you're still looking for sells. But this price action, how it looks right now, is to me is not the real attractive price action to be trading. Pound Swiss here, you can see that one's coming off a peak formation low, and not much is moving. We're just continuing to look for buys on this one. There's not much to update here. We're not at a full cycle yet. I think we're at 2.4 times ADR on this one. So this one, there's not much to do. You keep looking for buys until you get evidence of a peak formation. And the peak formation for me, if it can make it up to here to this particular point, like let's say 114.200 or so, 150, that should be enough for at least 2.5 times ADR. Because it's right at this high here was right at 2.4. So up here it should make it to about 2.5. That would be enough for a full cycle. That would be great. If we can make it up here into this area, that would be better, because you have a point of structure here with the reset, and then obviously above the reset you're going to have market orders as well. So this would be the ideal place. This right here would be the ideal place for a peak formation to form. So up here. But ultimately, it could form just here. This would be just fine enough here, and then prices will go down. All right, so now looking at USD Swiss, you can see we're coming off a peak formation low, and obviously because we've broken where the reset is, clearly we have enough for a full cycle. This is typically I want to say this is 3.2 times ADR right now. So we are at the end of the cycle, obviously, and we are looking for a peak formation high to form. Now you can see here that we're starting to get that behavior, and so here's what I mean by that is you can see how we're starting to already create that reversal point here. You can see the 50 and the 13 EMAs are very close to each other, about to cross. So this is the evidence that I'm looking for a potential peak formation high to form. And so because of that, we're going to be watching this one. I would not be trading this pair right until it creates a new peak formation high, as it looks like there's some really good evidence right now that we are forming a peak formation high. Now what I'm really looking for, though, obviously, is this is going to probably be the first point of structure that I would need to break once we get the crossover. So if it were to do something like this, that would be enough to have the 50 and 13 cross each other, and then obviously it would break the structure here. It's already a full cycle. That at that point, that would be your new peak formation high, and then you would look for sells, right? From that aspect of it, kind of like the ideal places where we want to see peak formation highs form. We want to see them form right next to previous sets of structure, like resets. That's where the ideal place is. So we have some good evidence right now of it forming. We're just essentially waiting for the confirmations. Once we get the confirmations, then of course then we can start trading it again and looking for sells once we get that. Okay, now a couple things is that just because it's doing this and looking like it's forming, that doesn't mean that it's going to automatically create a peak formation high here, because just because it's at 2 times ADR doesn't automatically mean, okay, we're gonna start to get a peak formation high here. It can go higher. Remember that there is a range, right? So it can go all the way up here if it wants to where these market orders are sitting, and this is still a full cycle because it's only at 4.2 times ADR. So you can go all the way up here to do 4.2 times ADR. The likelihood of doing that, I don't know, but I'm just saying that it can do that, and it can go up here. So don't just automatically assume that, yeah, we're going to get a peak formation high. You're just looking for evidence of a possible peak formation to form, okay? And then you're still looking for all the other things that I pointed out, like the crossover, the break of structure, the 1 times ADR. So all those things matter, and that's why I have all those things there, because those things will help you create peak formations. If all those things are not there, then it's not a peak formation. So you might get a crossover here, but you didn't get a break of structure, right? You might get a a crossover here of the 13 and 50, but price never breaks the break of structure here, and then immediately goes higher. Well, that's why we have all the freaking rules in place, and so that's why I'm saying that, you know, this could continue. This could do the crossover, but it could also just continue to go higher without creating all the other, you know, things that we need for a peak formation to be confirmed. Very important to take all those things into account of why we have those specific rules when we're looking for peak formations to be created, or to help confirm peak formations when they are created. All right, because of this, because it could be a 4.2 times ADR cycle, not a 3.2 times ADR cycle. But we're just looking for all those confirmations to be there. All right, so looking at gold now, and I wanted to bring this pair in because I wanted to show you guys something that you will notice if you haven't noticed it already. When you put the ADR on, you can see the astronomical numbers of like 3,300, 3277. So these are all really, really big numbers. To keep it as simple as possible, guys, when looking at the ADR for gold, or for some of these indices for NAS 100, US 30, or whatever the case may be, what you're going to do is you're going to keep that number, okay, 3324, whatever. When you go to measure out, okay, you may get this other astronomical number, like in this case of like 75 or 74,995. Okay, this number here, that when you're reading it, is wrong. You need to move the comma over by one spot. So it's really 7,500 is really what the number is. Okay, so it's not 74,000. So just make sure that this is specifically with gold. Okay, just make sure that you're moving the comma over one. So really, this is, you know, let's say to measure this out, if we're averaging, let's say 3,300, okay, for the ADR, the range so far, the movement that we've gotten is about 7,500. If you use 7,500, obviously divide that by 3,300, you'd get about 2.2 times ADR, right? So that's where we are in the cycle on gold. So for this specific pair, that's what you need to understand about the ADR and how to read it when you're measuring this out on gold. Okay, so don't get confused when you see this huge number here. You just need to move the comma over one. Okay, so right now 2.2 times ADR, obviously there's nothing to move here. Even though we've had a crossover and all that stuff, we don't have enough yet for a full cycle, right? So we don't do anything with this. We're not up, there's nothing to update here. We just keep it the same. Price action is just moving sideways. Clearly we know that if we look at from the daily time frame, we're in a huge consolidation here between the 22, I want to say 2298 or 2300, all the way up, you know, to 2335, right? So we're in that little range. So until we break that range, we're not really going to do anything much of movement here. So if we look at it from the smaller time frame of a 1 hour time frame here, what I would really focus in on this particular pair is whether or not we can break above like 2340, right? If we can break above 2340, then very likely we're going to go and see higher prices. If that's going to be the case, then this down here, this would ultimately be a reset, okay? And prices would obviously go higher. We're already at, you know, we've already reached all-time highs on gold anyways, okay? And obviously, you know, with all the things going on around the world, with all the different, you know, political stuff and wars going on and all around the world, people are going to go to gold as a safe haven. It always happens, and it always will continue to happen. People will always go to gold for a safe haven. So that's what drives up the prices of gold. And so don't be surprised, right, if we continue to make all-time highs over the next year, 2 or 3 years because of this. In this particular case, because we don't have this previous cycle is a different ADR, right, than the ones that we're currently on. So that's why this is a full cycle. Even though this moved all the way pretty much very close to where this cycle is, it's still not enough based on the ADR that it's using for this cycle. So that's why we don't have it as a peak formation low or anything like that. It's just there. And we'll finish off with the dollar index. So obviously we know that the dollar index plays a huge role with the USD pairs, and really with a lot of other major pairs as well, but primarily with the USD pairs. Whatever this does essentially will be copied onto the US majors, so Euro USD, Pound USD, USD JPY, USD CAD, USD Swiss, AUD and NZD USD. So here's what I want you guys to pay attention to, how this currently is right now on the dollar index. So we have peak formation high, right? Came back down, went right back up to retest it, and then came back down again. Now you may ask yourself, well, why is this a peak formation high here? Why not this be, let's say, why can't this be like this? Why can't this be a reset here and we just get rid of all this stuff, right? Why can't we just have it like this? The reason you can't have it like that is because you had a crossover that happened here and you broke the first point of structure, which was here, right? So we came down, we broke that structure, we had the crossover, and we had a 1x ADR move. So all of the rules were met for a peak formation high to be there. So I have to respect it, and I have to respect the rules that I created for this, right? So that's why that peak formation is actually there. That's why the peak formation high is there. Now obviously we can see immediately it went higher, and that's why we have it as a reset now. So if we have it as a reset here, because obviously it went higher, but now it's starting to stall out. You can see that clearly, right? So what am I looking for out of this pair to do any kind of changes? Well, the first things first, let's go to the daily chart real quick. And so I have this as a reset because obviously it broke previous structure. And so all I'm waiting for is whether or not this is going to go higher to this particular mark of, 106, 400 or so, give or take, based on the daily time frame. That's the next area of structure, right? Now, what I'm looking for on the smaller time frame is obviously I want to make sure that this continues to go higher. But if it doesn't go higher, okay, and let's say specifically that it breaks below this area right here, if it breaks below here, so if it does this, clearly this is not a reset if that happens. Okay, so here's my point with this is I need you guys to remember that you're doing this in real time. Like we're not going back, right? We don't have the luxury of going back into the charts and seeing the entire picture to map it out, okay? Like you would be if you were, practicing or backtesting or whatever the case may be. You're doing this in real time. So you're literally going off the data that you have. And so I need you guys to understand and realize that, okay, sometimes you may have this as a reset, but price action comes back down again and shows you, hey, in reality, it's not a reset. It's just going to end up being another peak formation high, and we're still looking for, and that's okay. I need you guys to understand that that's okay, that's going to happen. You're not going to be perfect at this. Your only job is to do the best that you can based on the data that you have available. And right now, based on all the rules that we have, right, for peak formations and everything, this right now is a reset. Okay, but I need you guys to understand that when some certain things like this behavior of price action just happens, there will be times when you have something labeled as a reset that ends up being a failed reset. And so that's why I like to wait. I've started now to wait a little bit longer before I start to say, is it a failed reset or reset, because of these scenarios here. So I need you guys to understand that. Okay, so in this case here, I'm bringing this up because I need you guys to understand and see it, is the fact that if price action were to break below here, you can see that we just had a crossover. So that's already happened. So the crossover has already happened. So if we were to get a break below here, that would be the break of structure, and then essentially we would just measure, right, from here to here, has it been at least 1 times ADR? I'm pretty sure it's going to be, the answer is yes. And if that's the case, then all we do is we simply just change this from from a reset to a failed reset. And then this becomes a new peak formation high, and then we go from there. That's it. But this is the reason why on some of these pairs like Euro USD, I'm just waiting, right? I could easily say, hey, here's another peak formation low, we're looking for buys. But I'm not going to do that because I see that the dollar index, which is directly tied to this, is also doing very similar behavior, right? And whatever this does, whatever the dollar index does, is ultimately what's going to lead Euro USD to do what it's going to do. And it's going to lead to Pound USD to do what it's going to do. Okay, so understand the impact of the dollar index when you compare it to the other USD pairs. All right, so if you're a trader that specifically trades a lot or that are heavily in USD pairs, so AUD USD, NZD USD, USD Swiss, USD CAD, USD JPY, Pound USD, Euro USD, you really, really need to be paying attention a lot to the dollar index, because this is going to basically give you clues as to what the other pairs are going to do that are tied to the dollar. Guys, I hope that this week's video has brought a lot of clarity to you when going through these different pairs and giving you my thoughts and sharing the things that I'm looking for between the peak formations, the ADRs, the using of the daily charts, the failed resets, and the resets. All right, guys. So hope you enjoyed this particular video. Do me a favor, like, subscribe to the channel, guys. Share the content, and we'll see you in the next video.